Already 15 people.
Pardon me?
It's already 15 people.
Oh, I said I ain't hear you, but what up?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for all of you who are already tuned in on time. I see people are still kind of rolling into the meeting, so I'm going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes before we get started, but we'll get started here in the next minute or two. Q2 task force meeting. All right, I think we are starting to equalize the number of participants that we have on the meeting, so we're going to go ahead and get us started, be respectful of everyone's time. Welcome again to our Q2 Vision Zero Task Force meeting. So we have a very busy agenda for today's meeting, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome all of you once again for joining the meeting today. We appreciate you being here. After some introductory notes, teasing a little bit on the slide, I'm going to be getting into providing an update on what we've been up to at the regional level from a Vision Zero perspective. Then Adriana is going to do a report out on our first Vision Zero annual report, which we did wrap up in the time since our last quarterly meeting. Adriana is going to also provide an update on where we are with developing that methodology for before and after evaluations for safety projects and talk a little bit about our next steps in that process. Then I'll be back to report out on our most recent white paper that we just wrote, and it's now on our website, on how we can balance speed management and emergency response times. Then we have a special guest with us today, Teresa Hall, who's on screen right now, coming to us from Citian. She's our customer service rep, and she's going to be talking a little bit about some of the updates that have been made to our crash platform since we did the training back at the end of January. And we're also going to do some live demos on some functionality that we think may be useful to many of you. And then we'll have a couple other items, a public comment period. Go ahead and wrap up. That said, before we get into any of that, I wanted to start off today's meeting by wishing Mike a happy retirement. I think a lot of you on the line are already aware that Mike Wilson retired from MetroPlan Orlando. Mike was with MetroPlan Orlando for almost 33 years. During that time, he was a tireless advocate for bicyclists and pedestrian safety in the region and really beyond. In addition to being our bike ped expert internally at MetroPlan Orlando, and for many of you, he was our bike ped planner. And then in the later years of his career, he expanded that to also focus on safety, a critical part of our safety team at MetroPlan Orlando. So Mike's last day was July 2nd, and we already miss him terribly, but I'm super excited to be able to wish him a happy retirement. He's going to be headed out west, and I'm already somewhat living vicariously through him. Mike's actually on the line because he can't get enough of safety. So we're gonna have time during our member comment period for anyone who would like to send him some well wishes. You're also welcome to leave him some notes in the chat. For those of you on the panel side, you should have functionality to do that. So a silent round of applause for Mike. I think see him. Moving on, get into that Vision Zero regional update, starting off with an update on where we are with our first group of RSA corridors that we're well underway on. We have been working with our local partners from the cities of Orlando, Maitland, Longwood, Castleberry, Winter Park, and then also Seminole County on this 7 grouping of RSA corridors. They're all well underway. The walk audits for each of the corridors occurred sometime in the mid May to sort of early June timeframe, and each of those project teams is currently working on their project documentation. I think everyone's already had their sort of countermeasures meeting following the walk audits, and so now they're developing those first drafts of the RSA reports. And a couple of those RSAs are also doing some concept development, and so they're busy doing that. From a timing perspective, all of these corridors will be wrapped by October, but I think the vast majority of them will be wrapped later next month or in September. So with that being said, we will be coming back to you at either our Q3 or Q4 meeting with some sort of high-level takeaways about some of the deficiencies and issues that we were seeing on the walk audits, and some information about sort of the types of recommendations that are being made across the board with that first tranche. What that also means is that we can move on to the next grouping of corridors, and we've already started some of that outreach. We've been in coordination with Orange County, who was not in a place to get started when we did that first grouping, but we've already been in coordination with them on the 2 corridors that we're going to start off with Orange County. There's a roadway segment on Thunder Road and then the Dean Road. So I'll be reaching out to you guys in the next couple of weeks just to confirm that those are still the corridors you forward with and start talking about what type of RSAs. With Seminole County, who was actually a partner with MetroPlan Orlando on that grant, and so they have their own sort of pot of funds that we're working with. They're going to be pursuing an additional 3 corridors to do RSAs on with this second grouping. One on International Parkway, just south of Heathrow, another segment of 1792 in Sanford that we'll be looking at, and then also Tuscaloosa Road, the second segment, just be looking at Seminole County. And then Osceola County, we have not forgotten you. I've now had a chance to reach out to you, but that email is coming this week to revisit the set of priority corridors that you initially sent to see if those are still your priorities and which ones might be your top priorities. And start talking about what type of RSA to do. So in terms of timing for this second grouping, we'll be sort of doing that outreach and confirming corridors and RSA types over the next few weeks here in July and beginning of August. Be spending August, maybe a little bit of September if needed, on scoping for each of those RSA corridors. And then the intent right now is to go to notice to proceed and kick off that next tranche of RSA corridors sometime in September. We're all really, I know Adriana and I are really hoping that for this tranche it'll be a little cooler when we go out and do the walk. So steam. Stay tuned for more on that. Next, I wanted to take a look and deliver a little piece of the findings from our current PBCAT intern, Jamie McMillan, who has been looking at e-micromobility crashes during the time with us in the last or so. She did a fantastic presentation to TAC and also to Mac. So if you were on either of those meetings, just sort of sit back and listen this time. But there was some great finding that I wanted to share some of those with you. So that. So Jamie's analysis that she's been working on looked at a little over 2,200 crash reports that involved non-motorist crashes for 2025, all coming out of City 4. And as a part of that analysis that she was doing under the watchful eye of Mike, she looked at our crashes by age group, also looked at KSI rates, or fatal and severe injury rates by mode, speed-related crashes by mode, and then also lateral positioning by mode. as they were approaching that analysis, there were sort of three key questions that I continue considering. First, are e-micromobility users more vulnerable to crashes than other modes? And if so, are there certain issues that vulnerable them? A second set of questions were sort of how are e-bikes impacting what we're seeing for crashes in terms of speeding, which facilities are being used, and then those KSI crash rates. And then what age groups are the most likely to experience crashes in particular on this method. So jumping in, first they took a look at just all micromobility crashes. So that's all non-motorist crashes, that full 2,200 or so crashes I noted before. And that's that pie chart that's on the left here. That includes pedestrian crashes, our traditional bicycle crashes, and then some of our powered modes. And really the big sort of takeaway here is the vast majority of those crashes are still happening with some of those traditional bikes with pedestrians. That said, for e-scooters and e-bikes, they're starting to take up a more meaningful share of that data. Really, I think 2025 was it's kind of the first year we had enough of that type of data to be using analysis. That was exciting. When taking out the pedestrian crashes and just looking at sort of the wheeled modes, we start to see that the traditional bicycle crashes are still the lion's share of those crashes, but we do start to see that for the e-bikes, they're about 17% of those crashes, and that the e-scooters are about 18%. So about 35% of those wheeled crashes are happening on e-bikes and e-scooters, a really significant percentage. Looking at those micromobility crashes by age grouping, a few interesting findings. First, we found that for the younger users, they tended to be overrepresented with the e-scooter crashes, and red there on that line. And then as we start to look at a little bit older users, our older teens, our young adults, age 19 to 29, we start to see that they are more overrepresented on the e-bike crashes and e-scooters. There's still a significant percentage as well. And then as we're looking at some of our older riders, they're still very well represented, and you're seeing there that they tend to be more overrepresented in that traditional bicycle. Taking a look at the micromobility crashes by injury severity, a couple of interesting sort of takeaways there. First, in looking at any single mode, the percentage of the crashes that are KSI crashes tended to be about the same, somewhere in that 79% range. The device of those crashes, about 9% were KSI crashes. For those e-scooters, about 7% were KSI crashes. Where more interesting, I think, findings tend to come in when you look at the crashes across the various modes for KSI crashes. And that's where you start to see those percentages sort of breaking down more in these pie charts we saw before, where the vast majority of those KSI crashes are still traditional bicycle crashes, with the e-bike and e-scooter overall still somewhat underrepresented in the KSI crashes. Moving on to looking at those micromobility crashes that were speed related, a couple of takeaways that they found there. For the speed related crashes, the right hook and let cross type crashes were the most represented for the e-bikes. But then if we were looking at the e-bikes and e-scooters combined, we start to see that there was overrepresentation among both of those modes. So we're just starting to see that uptick in the number of speed-related crashes, and that's something I think that we've also already internalized. One of the reasons that these types of devices are more dangerous is those higher speeds. And then finally, looking at the lateral positioning by mode, the major takeaway there is for our e-scooters, they tend towards using sidewalks, side paths, crosswalks. This makes sense. The scooters, as compared to e-bikes, tend to go a little bit slower. And then when looking at the data, we know that those users tend to skew a little bit younger than the e-bikes. Is a sense if they're slower speeds, that they might stay out of travel lanes and bike lanes. And then that flips in the other direction when you start to look at our e-bike users, where they do tend towards using the bike lane, the shoulder, or even the travel lane. And we are hypothesizing that that's because they have the capacity to get up to their speed where it's more comfortable for them to be on that quiz too. So, in terms of some of the like big takeaway trends from Jamie and its analysis, first, overall, e-micromobility users, e-micromobility crashes are still underrepresented in overall crash data. We're seeing, of course, a lot of play on the news, and it's an important issue, but in terms of what the data is showing, at least for now, as compared to traditional bikes, e-micromobility represented. For our e-bikes, they tend to be the most vulnerable to speed-related crashes, likely because they can go at those higher speeds. Even like be modified to go even higher speeds. And then those modes are most likely to be used in bicycle and traffic as compared to some of the modes that we looked at. And then for our e-scooters, we know that our younger riders are gravitating towards that particular mode. And then they're most likely to use our sidewalks and sidewalks. So I think sort of the high level for us to go away is that speed is really determining where people are using these devices. Then we, I think, as planners and engineers need to be developing with infrastructure and educational campaigns really that are going to serve the full spectrum of needs and speeds. Which dovetails nicely into the next topic that I want to talk about, which is just a progress update on our e-bike education pilot program. For those of you that were able to tune into our board meeting last week, you learned a little bit on this more. So the purpose for that pilot, as I just sort of talked about, and walking through that data that Jamie crunched, we know that e-bikes are an increasingly popular mode really across the board, but certainly we're seeing it up to the teens. We also know that our younger riders are the most likely to not have any formal training on traffic laws or on how to use those devices safely. And I think with that combination of greater usage and lack of training, you're starting to see more of those crashes and more severe crashes that are popping up that are So to combat that, we think one of the answers really is going to be training and education. And so we've been partnering with the American Bicycling Education Association to deliver an e-bike training course that they developed. The course itself is about 60 minutes long. It's comprised of about 21 modules that are self-directed, and they cover a little bit of everything from safe usage of the devices, rules of the road and bike infrastructure, some tips on avoiding crashes, and then importantly, some tips on how to ride in groups safely. As a part of the course, there are some quizzes that are interactive quizzes. It's not the sort of course where you're just sort of sitting and watching a video for 60 minutes. It's designed to keep the kids engaged. And then on top of the quizzes that are already included in the course, as a part of our pilot, we do pre and post course surveys to test both sort of knowledge retention and then also attitudes before and after taking the course. So this slide provides you a snapshot of how we set up the program. I mentioned that we were trying to target teens, in particular, sort of the 12 to 15, that pre-driver age is what we're really trying to target, so that's grades 7 through 10. And our intent was to try and test this in all 3 counties within our planning area. And we bought initially up to 500 seats, and we had the authorization to bump that up to 1,000 seats if there is interest. And so from an outreach perspective, we started out with reaching out directly to all 3 of the county school districts in our planning area. And we did that because we really wanted to have some of that programmatic buy-in and get whatever help we could from the district and getting the word out to individual schools. I mentioned a program APA. And so as we were reaching out to the schools and looking at the sort of key milestones on the right there, we spent January and February with outreach describing the program, sort of working for some of the kinks of administering this type of program. And then by the spring, the school district of Osceola County was ready to actually deploy the course. And they chose a voluntary model where students could come sort of back after school and sit and watch the course and do the surveys under the auspices of their SROs, which had a couple of schools in Osceola County. Through that effort, we were able to get about 3 kids that completed the course. I think having kids come back after school was maybe a heavy lift for them. And so we kept moving along, kept our coordination up, and by May, in coordination with the Orange County Public Schools and then specifically Luminary Middle School, we were able to do a deployment. This slide. So our Luminary Middle School deployment was by far our strongest deployment in the spring semester. Instead of doing a voluntary model there, they actually pursued an in-class model. They found that their social studies classes sort of had a free week where they had some time where they were testing or were doing a new curriculum. And so they sort of slotted this course into that timing, and a little under 270 students were able to complete the course. We do the before and after surveys, and then what's showing on this slide here in terms of the average grade was the in-course quiz grade of about 96%, which we think shows some significant knowledge uptake. So we're really excited about that. As a part of getting things ready with Luminary Middle School and really Greater Orange County Public Schools, we did work to make it so that the course was able to be uploaded into Canvas, which is in my classroom that all three of our schools area use. And so that just helped with some of the data concerns that OCPS had, and making it so that it was a single sign-on for the students. And this is powerful as well because it will allow teachers to really get something that can be assigned to individual students to complete, or something that can be completed during class time in class. As we were setting up the course within the OCPS sort of Canvas environment, we actually have it ready now so that it's set up to be able to be deployed with Seminole County Public Schools or the Osceola County School District as we're continuing. So we're hoping that will help us in the administration of this kind of during the years of the fall semester. I will note that we had a second school, Timber Springs Middle School, that was already up and configured in Canvas. And then we just really ran out of time at the end of the spring semester, but since we'll be extending this pilot, we're going to be touching with them to see if we can get them on board one class semester. In terms of some of the lessons learned in the first sort of part of our pilot, from an engagement perspective, first, finding some sort of champion either at the district level or at the school level, whether it's a principal or engaged teacher, is really critical to getting things moving along and so that we can get to a eventual launch of the program. A second sort of takeaway for us was that launching earlier in the year is just a good idea. I mentioned that we started this effort back in January, just wanted to get some started from an educational perspective. But by the time we were sort of in and had coordinated with the right people, we were up against end of year testing and other end of year activities that just ate into the time that we had. And that's part of the reason actually I worked this task now towards the end of the academy, so that we can pursue some of these schools and school districts that we were able to get traction with in the spring in the coming semester. And then a third takeaway from an engagement perspective is that while the incentives, the gift cards, things like that are helpful, they guarantee participation. And then moving on to thinking about some of our lessons learned in terms of scaling the program. As I mentioned earlier, we felt like that self-paced sort of in-class Canvas delivery was by far the better option in terms of engagement, getting students to actually complete the course versus the voluntary in-person sessions. And so moving forward as we move into the fall semester, we'll be sort of encouraging that model of our schools and school districts. And I am talking a little bit about the importance of that single sign-on of Canvas. So in terms of next steps, we are going to be re-engaging Osceola County Public Schools and Orange County Public Schools and the Osceola County School District again in the fall semester, redoubling our efforts to engage Seminole County Public Schools again, and then also pursuing some opportunities to engage the Florida virtual schools so we get some of those online students. We'll be reaching back out to the schools that we've already engaged with in the spring semester, Luminary and Timber Springs Middle, and also maybe engaging some of those schools where we know that they have either a lot of students that are utilizing these types of devices or perhaps areas where there has been some sort of actually it's been just because we have a recent interest there. So our intent is to work with these schools and complete more of the courses, and we're going to have a cutoff around the end of October for the course completion of the survey, which will give us some time to crunch the numbers and be able to come back to our board and go to this body as well before the end of the year with our report. So stay tuned for more on that. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lara. Well, as Lara mentioned earlier, we recently completed our annual report, and this report is now available on our website. With this QR code that you see on the screen, you can find the executive summary with the highlights of the most important trends and information out of the data analysis from this effort. And you will also find available on our website a story map that will give you more detail on the data and information that you will find, such as emerging hotspots and what are the next steps in terms of Vision Zero actions and projects. For the crash trends, we updated the data with Signal 4 crash data through 2024. And for the Metroplan Orlando region, we have seen a decrease of 30% in fatalities and serious injuries, in crashes, fatalities and serious injuries. This is a very encouraging trend. However, we still have a lot of work to do. The goal, again, is to get to zero. For the fatalities and serious injury by jurisdiction, there are 12 jurisdictions that you can see on the map that have reached zero fatalities in this period between 2028 and 2024. And there are three jurisdictions, including Belle Isle, Lake Buena Vista, and Oakland, that have achieved zero serious and fatalities in their jurisdictions. Here you will see some trends, some more details in terms of trends related to fatalities and serious injuries for each of the counties. We also identify interesting trends for driving and riding behaviors in a region. The highest decrease we'll see is 45% decrease in alcohol-involved crashes and 41% decrease in drug-involved crashes. We have also noticed a big change in citations for distracted driving and hit and run offenses, which have declined across the region. We understand that some of the factors that can contributing to this change in behaviors are related to continued education and enforcement efforts across the region. In terms of the crash types, we have also seen decreases for rear-end crashes, rollover crashes, and angle crashes. These are all decreases for fatal and serious injuries between 2018 and 2024. And when we look at the different roadway facilities for our Metroplan Orlando region, we see that the biggest decrease in fatalities and serious injuries are happening on minor arterials, followed by local roads, and then a 29% decrease on major collector roads. These tell us again that reduced speeds give drivers more time to react and then significantly lower the impact of any crash that happen on facilities that have lower speeds. And for the annual report, we also work with our partners to understand the status of all the action items that have been identified for all the local plans and the regional plan. And we see that out of the 570 actions, we have about 6% across the region that have been completed, while 24% are in progress. And you see in the graphic to the right, the different status, the different progress on these action items. We also collected information about safety projects that have been implemented or are underway across the region. There are all the jurisdictions are implementing projects that to improve roadway safety. So you will find in our annual report a really nice summary of where these projects are located, what is the status, what is the focus of these projects. Some are pedestrian focus, bicycle. There are some that are just for all modes. So that's the update for the 349 safety projects that we have identified for the region. These projects, a lot of them involved engineering improvements, but also some involve targeted enforcement efforts, safety education initiatives. So there is a variety of projects that have been implemented or that are in progress that have helped us trend in the right direction of reducing fatalities and serious injuries in our roadway network. Some include the Bike Walk Central Florida bike rodeos. We also have some specific improvements, such as the rally improvements in Orange County, the Ride Smart Florida initiative, FDOT District 5 for motorcycle safety, and some of the Stop on Red campaigns. So a variety of projects that have helped the region improve safety for our network. Okay, based on the findings of the annual report, we took a look at our specific actions for the regional plan, and we assess what will be the adequate next steps for some of these actions. So as you see in this summary table, there are actions that we know we have to move in priority, such as exploring using speed reduction as an evaluation criterion, advancing the 20 mile per hour residential speed limit initiative. So some of the actions in our action plan will be moved to priority. Some will continue, such as the targeted outreach, and some will be augmented. So if you want to get more details on this information, you can access our website and take a look at the annual report. And the crash trends also allow us identifying some emerging hotspots. There are several communities that have experienced increases in serious injuries and fatalities in 2023 and 2024 specifically. So these help us understand what are these areas that we need to focus on to be more proactive. And you see here in this slide some of these jurisdictions and the specific location by mode. So we have pedestrian, bicycle, motorcycle, and motor vehicle. Again, for more details, you can scan the QR code here to access the annual report and to also access the story map. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the before and after safety project evaluation. This, if you recall, we have been working on developing a methodology that will help as a guide for the region to conduct before and after evaluations. The intent of this is to demonstrate effects of a specific countermeasure treatments, qualify the overall effectiveness, then identify what changes in some of the design assumptions should be made, and what are those unintended consequences. There are times that implementing a specific treatment bring some unintended consequences. So it is important to include this in the evaluation of the before and after conditions for a specific safety treatment. This QR code, if you scan the QR code, will take you to our safety tools page, where you can find the before and after evaluation toolkit. It is a spreadsheet where you will find a summary of the counters that we have in our countermeasure toolkit that we develop as part of our Vision Zero efforts. But with this specific tool will help you identify the specific description in terms of what this countermeasure is intended to address in terms of safety, and will also help you identify some of the measures, some of the metrics that can be applied to evaluate that before and after condition. So some will be outcome metrics that will help evaluate the outcome. Some are exposure metrics that will help consider kind of normalize the data in terms of level of roadway traffic, user activity, to kind of have more apples to apples comparison once you're evaluating the before and after conditions. You will also identify some behavior metrics. As we all know, the specific safety treatments are also looking at addressing behaviors and some of the trade-off metrics. So some of these unintended or adverse effects associated with specific countermeasures that can be changes in crash types, some operational performance. So those trade-off metrics can also be found in this tool. So this is now for our next slide. Here we see a sample of what you can see in that specific tool that I was explaining a moment ago. So I invite you to take a look at this great resource and use it for your evaluation of before and after conditions. It will be also important as you are scoping a specific project to understand what type of metrics you can evaluate from the beginning. So you have a baseline. And once you have that project implemented, you will be able to use those same metrics for the after conditions and then be able to compare the same outcomes or the same information that you are trying to address. Okay. Now, as part of this effort, we have also developed a scope template. This we will be testing with some pilot projects. So the before and after scope templates will serve as a guide on how to actually conduct a before and after evaluation. So it will help you define the project and identify those metrics, then what type of data collection to complete, then also the steps for the safety project evaluation, including quantitative and qualitative metrics, benefit cost analysis, then a guide on how to summarize and document those lessons learned, and then future coordination and implementation after you have completed the analysis. As I mentioned, we're going to be testing this scope template with some pilot projects to refine this before and after evaluation methodology, and then share this tool with our partners. Currently, we have already identified the pilot projects working with Seminole, Orange, and Osceola County. And we are in the process of getting ready to start the before and after evaluation pilot. And then towards the end of July, August, the idea is to finish or just continue working with these pilot projects to refine the methodology and scope template. As I mentioned, we have worked with our partners in Seminole County to identify a pilot project that is related to some posted speed limit reductions along these roadway segments. So the intent is to understand the after conditions. Right now, we have already data that was collected before the posted spill limit was reduced on these roadways. And now we're going to assess the effectiveness of that treatment. For Orange County, the pilot project will be for evaluating the effectiveness of the Rio Grande Safety Project. So this project converted a 3-lane typical section, including a 2-way left turn lane from Holden Avenue to 33th Street. It was converted to a 3-lane typical section with left turn lanes and stripe medians. Also, along Rio Grande, a segment between Gore, from 33th Street to Gore Street, it was converted from a 5-lane typical, including a 2-way left turn lane, to a 3-lane typical section with left turn lanes, stripe medians, and buffer bike lanes in each direction. So this project included a variety of safety improvements that we'll be evaluating. And lastly, for Osceola County, we will be evaluating the effectiveness of this intersection on West Side Boulevard and Sand Mine Road. Was converted from a 2-way stop control to all-way stop control. Once we're done with the evaluation of the before and after conditions for these 3 pilot projects, we will report back and we will be sharing the scope template and the lessons learned from these pilot programs. Now, I'll turn it over to Lara.
All right.
Continue.
Thank you, everyone. That was great. I'm back, everybody. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we have wrapped up our most recent white paper that focuses on how we can best balance implementation of speed management strategies with minimizing our emergency response times. So the white paper is currently up on our website, and after the meeting, when we send out our sort of after action email, like we always do, I will sort of white paper. So I want to talk a little bit about there we go. Okay. About the data that actually fed the white paper, and that really came from 2 sources. First, our consultant team, Tennessee, that we worked with on this white paper, did a fairly extensive literature review, looking at almost 60 different resources that span academic research, national guidance documents, looking at some of our local guidance documents, and then some prior case studies on traffic calming and potential impacts on emergency response times. Really, the purpose of the literature review is to provide an evidence base for what's actually known about the impacts of speed management devices on emergency response times, and so to identify some potential misconceptions. The second major source of information for the white paper was our stakeholder outreach. We ended up deploying 2 practitioner roundtables. I see actually quite a few people that were participants on that roundtable that have joined today's meeting. So thank you all again for your assistance with developing this white paper. So we had our first roundtable meeting back at the end of October, where we talked with attendees about some of their issues and challenges and potential solutions for how we can best sort of balance emergency response on speed management streets. And then at early April, we came back for a second roundtable once we had a draft document that was available for those initial attendees to review. We came back to go over the draft white paper and to start talking about potential next steps. So that was the other sort of major source of information. In terms of the structure of the white paper, there are sort of 4 broad sections. The first relates to one of the impetus for actually doing the white paper, which was trying to get some kind of better understanding of the ISO PPC, or the Insurance Services Office Public Protection Classification Program. We know that a couple of our FDs here in the region are ISO 1000 rated, so we want to understand what the impact of emergency response time was on that rating. So that was an element. A second element that's represented in the white paper are speed management considerations, looking at design guidelines and implementation guidelines, both nationally and what we have in place to and the effects of various types of speed management on emergency response times. Section delves into that. We have a section that summarizes that stakeholder outreach, what we heard from our participants. And then really to the bulk of the paper, summarizing some of the recommendations for how we can estimate balance speed management and emergency response. Before I get into those recommendations, which are also spent the bulk of my time today, did want to just talk about a few of the misconceptions that the study team did find related to that ISO PPC rating and speed management. First, which is that speed management measures the jeopardize a few of these ISO class 1 rating. And we'll say that one is a myth. Those PPC ratings are driven primarily by fire department resources, staffing, training, water supply, emergency communication, all those things that aren't necessarily related to emergency response times. They are, however, a part of that scale, like the 105 points that can get you to that was a class 1 rating. 10 of those points are related to emergency response times. And in the roundtable meetings that have in particular hearing from our fire response attendees, a lot of times getting to that next level of rating, so every point matters, but to say across the board that speed management measures are going to jeopardize your ISO class 1 rating. That's true. Second myth was that those ISO PPC response time requirements are the same as or equivalent to the National Fire Prevention Association or NFPA response time benchmarks. Also not true. Really what that ISO rating is evaluating is the fire protection capability for insurance purposes, whereas the NFPA benchmarks are more sort of performance measures. So the NFPA benchmarks are going to be a matter for life safety purposes and operations purposes, something that I fire response team would have to pay attention to, but they don't necessarily determine whether or not they're eligible for that as class 1 rating. In terms of myth 3, that any increase in emergency vehicle travel time will negatively affect ISO scoring. Not necessarily true. Again, that's one of those across the board type statements where modest travel time changes may not directly translate into a change in their ISO scoring. So that myth. And then the final myth being that speed management and the emergency response objectives are inherently incompatible. Throughout the literature review that the team did, and even in our conversations at the roundtables, I think that there are lots of ways that speed management strategies can intersect with emergency response times and the goals that we have around safety coming from both perspectives that make them very compatible. So in terms of things that we know are not a myth, death and serious injuries are not acceptable. Humans make mistakes and they're vulnerable. And that responsibility is shared on the part to make sure that those redundancies are there. And so really, again, the impetus for this paper and the finding of this paper that slowing speeds and making sure that we can have those fast response times are going to save lives. And so it's incumbent on us to balance those two. So one more thing before I get into those recommendations, I do just want to point out a resource that's within the white paper that I think you can use forward. It says table 7 on the side. It's actually table 17 and 11 now. We end up doing some minor adjustments to the formatting for this table at the end. But really what's within each of these tables are listed speed management strategies, various categories from horizontal and vertical reflection, street width reduction, some routing restrictions, and then some other measures that you could consider that are going to have some of that positive impact on speed management, but that may be also appropriate, varying levels of appropriateness for use on those primary emergency routes. And so for within the table, you'll see a depiction of what the measure sort of looks like. There'll be some notes on the typical applications for that particular strategy. And then there will be some notes about whether or not the strategy is appropriate for a primary route that are. So you can check that out. Lots of good information. But on to the recommendations. So there are sort of five groupings of recommendations that I'll walk through briefly. First, coordinating early and continuously with emergency services. Second, applying a context-sensitive tiered approach. Number three, prioritizing safety without compromising emergency response. Number four, designing for connectivity and system efficiency. And then number five, building consistency through standards and shared practice. So looking at that first one, within this coordinating early, that's something that we, I think, are already doing with some other groups. And I think that the finding here is really that we need to make sure we're having that early coordination to the extent possible with our emergency response, with our fire teams, to the extent possible during the planning phases of things, waiting until design to see what harder to change things once you get there. So I think that early coordination is really important. As a part of that early coordination, the potential for using prototypes or home layouts, you can see that in the pictures, right, can be really helpful in laying out what a strategy may look like for your emergency responders, so they can get a feel for what that means for them and how they may be able to navigate things through or around that type of strategy. And then also they can weigh in on things, tweaks in the design that may be needed to make it so that it's both sort of meeting the mark when it comes to speed management, but also not impacting anything to response times or the ability for fire apparatus to go to do. Another element within this first tranche is maintaining a shared speed management database to support routing decisions. What that could look like would be just each of you really sending someone, potentially Metropolitan Orlando, which we get to later, a shapefile that shows wherever you have speed management devices within your jurisdictions, and something that you can compile and make available on our website so that all of you can access it and sort of see what their speed management devices throughout the region. But importantly, for it to be somewhere that our emergency response teams would have to go in, download it, and potentially upload it into their whatever software that they're using to help them plan their routes. Moving on to that next grouping, thinking about applying a context-sensitive tiered approach. First, we're always going to want to start with looking at the least restrictive tools when it comes to speed management and trying to make sure that we're not having negative impacts on emergency times. And that can include things that are going to have no impact on emergency response times, education, enforcement, pavement markings, signages, are all things that can be deployed and should have minimal to no impact on the way that fire response apparatus are to get around. Want to be really mindful about matching treatments with the context of the area, with the roadway function, with the traffic volumes that we're expecting on the roadway. Using FDOT's context classification rubric, I think, can be helpful in sort of setting that up and helping go through where different types of treatments may make sense. And then really reserving some of those most restrictive measures to our lower speed, lower volume streets where it's really probably the case where you're going to want to have lower speeds anyways. Those would be the most appropriate for some of these more restrictive types of treatments. Looking at the third grouping, at prioritizing safety without compromising emergency response. Sort of similar, looking at favoring those treatments that are going to have minimal delay. So these maybe are a little bit more restrictive than things like education and pavement marking, but they're still not going to have a significant delay based on the research through the literature review on the emergency response times for fire apparatus. So things like cushions, offset tables, deflection, roundabouts. Those are all measures that can be designed in a way they're going to really minimize those response times. And as we're putting in place those types of measures, looking at that bottom box in the row, making sure that we are maintaining our clear lengths and turning radii, so that the different types of fire response or emergency response apparatus can still access whatever roadways or facilities that they need to. And then if there are places where, or if you're considering some of those more restrictive measures, things like your speed humps, routing restrictions, other types of sort of deflection, to avoid the primary emergency routes to the extent possible. And you'll see that another recommendation to come a little bit later is maintaining some sort of database of what those primary routes are, so that those of us on the sort of planning and design side of things can try and balance what types of strategies are being deployed on the primary routes versus others. Moving on to our fourth grouping, designing for connectivity and system efficiency. That's going to be taking a look at it through the literature review. One of the things that the team that we saw was that instituting an ordinance that requires some level of street connectivity, having those highly connected streets can be helpful both from the perspective of providing additional potential routes for emergency response vehicles, but it also has been shown to have some beneficial impacts on speed management as well. So considerations for how you can improve your street connectivity is something that you can look at. You know, when we start to have those types of conversations, sometimes there is a topic and say, well, when we increase the connectivity, then we tend to see more cut through traffic on these certain types of roadways or neighborhoods or places where you were already having speeding issues, and now are we going to exacerbate those? And I think sort of the takeaway there is if you're considering improving your street connectivity, making it a holistic consideration so that as you're improving connectivity, you're putting in place those measures that are going to address that cut through or the propensity for speeding, and trying to find other routes to get around. And then in the places where you are going to have some of those restrictive treatments, making sure that them from logical or attractable elements where there's relevant fiction. And then the last bunch of recommendations just about sort of building consistency through standards and shared practice, developing some sort of regional standards. I know at least Ultimate Springs has already sent us a detail for speed management treatment that has been sort of blessed by their emergency response folks, and we're going to be reaching out to others of you that may have those types of details that have already gone through sort of the gamut with your emergency response and have been approved. That we can share with each of you. So I think that can be a good starting point for some of those regional standards for how we're doing things. And then, of course, just looking at federal and national guidance that's already out there about potential treatments and the best ways to deploy them. And then there's options for establishing some sort of regional toolbox of the types of speed management tools that we'll be utilizing here. So very quickly, that was an overview of the recommendations that are in the speed management white paper. I encourage you to take some time and take a look at it. I think it's a pretty good read. It has a lot of good information in there. One thing that I did want to sort of open things up for, and we can maybe do hand raises as I'm asking some of these questions, but if you have thoughts, please do feel free to put them in the chat, or you raise your hand and want to say something. This is a meeting, even though on Zoom. So I mentioned a little earlier that part of the conversation that we had at that second roundtable, it might have even actually come up at the first one, was related to how we can best coordinate as a region and maintaining a shared speed management database to support routing decisions. So you can look for some outreach from us to start collecting some of those shape files. I guess what I would ask, those of you who maintain shape files, do you have a shapefile that shows where you currently have speed management devices? I guess I'm wondering if you might be talking up the wrong tree with this one. If you could either raise hand or drop a note in the chat if this is something that you're already maintaining, or if this is something to create from whole cloth, that would be helpful for us. And I'll move on to the next sort of tranche in terms of building consistency through standards and shared practice. One thing that we will be doing is we'll be reaching out to our emergency response cohort within the region to ask them for specifications for their largest vehicles or whatever standard vehicle they would want to be used for the product analysis. The type of analysis that you're doing as you're designing your speed management strategies. So as we collect those, we have a place on our website where we will make things available and share that it's ready. If we're able to collect shape files and consolidate some sort of shape file that shows what speed management devices are in the region, we probably put all of this sort of in the same place and have sort of emergency response coordination materials all in one place. I mentioned also that some have already started to share some of those approved details that they've had through their conversations with their emergency response fire response departments. If you have anything like that you're willing to share sort of for the good of the order, you go ahead and send it to me or Adriana. That makes it onto the website. And then the last one in terms of establishing a regional toolbox. I think the idea there would be to have probably some sort of working group, to start talking about what are those speed management strategies that either in consistent use throughout the region that we want to build on, or things that we want to just make standard as this is what we're going to use here in the region. For some of the speed pushing things, for instance, there's different spacing for where those wheel tracks are. Some use 7, some use others, something different. If there is a desire to standardize that across the region, that might be a conversation we have. Timing for what that working group might look like probably a little further down the line as we're working through the plethora of action items in our safety action plan, but it's on our radar. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read some comments, but as I'm doing that, I do want to turn things over to actually by 2 minutes. There we go. Teresa, welcome. So as I mentioned earlier, Teresa is going to just give us an update on some updates to our Crash platform since we did our training back in January, and then just some other fun information to share and a live demo for us. So Teresa, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And so excited to be here, guys. Appreciate you guys giving me time to do this. So we'll go ahead and dive in here. So as Laura had mentioned, I am Teresa. I work here as a client success manager at Citians. So for some of you, I met during trainings and webinars. Some of you guys might be seeing this for the first time, but good news is that this is really built for everyone. So we're going to do 3 things today. We're going to talk through what's been done since the training in January, and then we're going to go into the meat of the presentation, which is the feature demo, which is before and after studies. And then we're going to talk through some more ways to put Crash to work, and then also access to Crash in general. All right. Okay, so just kicking it off here. So nice to meet you all. As mentioned, I am your everything related to Crash. So day-to-day contact for access, training, questions, feature requests, anything that you can think of, you're welcome to reach out to me and get some information on. Big one here too is really being that bridge between how you're using the system and our engineering team. If you think about anything that could be useful in the system, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm able to get that over to them as needed. So contact information is here. I know Laura will be sending out the deck afterwards, but did want to have this here for you all to see as I am your point of contact. So wanted to orient ourselves around where Crash specifically sits within the Citian OS, right? So we have 2 products, Adapt and Crash. Adapt is more focused on roadway asset management and infrastructure performance analysis. So Crash, where we're sitting, is really focused on the traffic safety analysis. And what we're able to do is lean into AI digital twins to understand and bring in the advanced analytics that are needed to really see the improvements. Oh, what happened to the slides? Are other people seeing the recommendations for balanced emergency response?
Maybe you were going to the left. Maybe try your other arrow, whichever arrow you were hitting.
I wasn't hitting an arrow.
I'm advancing it for you right now.
Okay. I'm sorry, everyone. This is my first time as a panelist on a Zoom meeting.
All right.
Okay. All good. Okay, great. I'll cut to the chase. Essentially, Crash, what it's able to do is really accelerate those safety analyses by about 30 times, right? So something we'll see later today is things that can take months of consolidating information and pulling together can really be done in moments, right? And also in a dynamic way versus a static way. Okay, moving the slide. Let's see what happens. Okay, it went forward, so we're good. Thank you, Laura, for the help. Double clicking down into Crash a little bit more. So it's one system with 3 core functions, right? First is really processing that Crash data real time, right? So it's taking as up-to-date information as possible from the systems that we have, and then taking that, refining that data, and then allowing you to use that in outcome-driven analytical ways, right? So it's really pulling all those things together in the system, making it easier for you all to do that analysis as quickly as possible. Okay, so going into some of the post-training improvements that we've been able to do, 2 big ticket items here is that we've made updates to the base data and the relocation logic. So one, base data informs the relocation logic. So this was the big one that we wanted to focus on after training. A lot of you guys gave really informative feedback, saying that we need to focus on things like functional classification, making sure that that is aligned to FDOT. We did a lot of stuff updating ownership fields as well as adding jurisdictional layers as well. There's a lot here, so I won't read it off line by line, but did want to give an update there that that's aligned as expected now. And that means that the relocation logic now is much more confident, right? The relocation logic looks at both the base data and the crash record and says, how can we place this on the map? And what percentage are we confident that this is accurate based on the information the algorithm has access to? So we've seen a really good increase in that with this update to the base data as well as the relocation logic. So happy to report that we're sitting really well with 75% of the crashes above an 80% confidence scoring. And usually we see about 70% confidence scoring is how we actually map things in the system. So I'll get into some more detail there in a second, but did want to call that out. And then a couple of updates to some features that exist in the system for everybody here is we do have updates to our query tools. So this is those local context layers are now available and you can have proximity search. So something we see a lot of people do is you can search for schools, search for all accidents within 0.5 miles of a school, and it'll pull all of that in accordingly to filters that you have in place. Fact sheets are also live. So this is something that really pulls in a really clean PDF and infographics and statistics based on focus areas per jurisdiction. So people use this very heavily for council meetings, just getting information out to the public, things like that. And then finally is reverse countermeasures, and we'll get into this one shortly, but this is our intelligence tool that predicts where specific treatments can be effective across your network. This one's really great. It's a good starting point specifically with known successful countermeasures done throughout a network. So wanted to call that out as things that have been improved since training, and hopefully you all are already aware of these. So moving along, did just want to spend a little bit more time understanding where we are and what's been done with the data refinement. So 90% of the crashes do have a high enough confidence location to be mapped into the system. 10% of those do have insufficient information. Essentially, what's happening is there's missing fields that the algorithm can only do so much with, right? So what we do is that we do not map those 10%, rather they exist in the system, and we think about that more so as an audit. It's never going to appear in any sort of analysis that you do. You're making decisions off of this data. So that 10% that we do not have confidence in do not come into any of those analyses. But they are present in the system, kind of bucketed in their own area, where you can review those, and you can almost see that as an audit log of what's happening where with certain crashes in certain locations as well. So a couple of examples of what's happening is a cross street name is missing, right? So we can't actually say where that was placed on a segment, or route and measures are not available, or Latin longs are not available, and the narrative does not provide enough information for that to occur. So there are over 500,000 crashes in the system that do have 90% or higher confidence scores. So there's plenty of data in the system for you all to do really thorough analysis on. So I know you guys are all engineers, so wanted to kind of tell you what's going on in the background so you trust what's going on there. So wanted to orient ourselves a little further here as we continue on. So really MetroPlan Orlando's goals with Crash were three-pronged, right? So first is that safety planning and grant support. So being able to pinpoint those high injury locations quickly and on an ad hoc basis, right? Something that you're able to do dynamically as needed over time. And then just build the evidence and the narrative needed for grants, specifically for SS4A or anything happening on the state level. Know that we were able to work with a few of you back in the April-May timeline for the SS4A. So that was a really great exercise to see how folks were using it there. Secondly, was with the VRU and ped bike safety. Similarly, moving more so from a reactive to a proactive understanding of where and why pedestrians and VRUs are getting hurt. Again, being able to do that in a way that's dynamic allows you to kind of split it the way you need to, specific for your jurisdiction. Crash really allows you to do that in a very robust way. And thirdly, and we saw this earlier, even in this presentation today, is before and after evaluation, right? It's building in that motion and that muscle as routine on every project. And I think we'll see as we dive into that example moving forward that we can do this in a way that is much more efficient and effective. And again, dynamic, not static. So you can cut it a few ways to get more information around certain treatments that have been done within a network. So moving on. So giving a quick overview of what the before and after studies really are. So it's a 3-step motion that you'll focus on. So number 1 is you want to define a moment in time. So you pick a date a project was completed, a construction period. There's a couple of different ways that you can slice it. For our example today, we'll do a pick a date that the project was completed. What Crash then does is it splits it into the before window and the after window automatically, which is great. What then you do is you compare that to what's changed. So you can look at summarized KPIs, crash frequency, severity, collision type, et cetera. You usually go into before and after studies knowing what you're looking for, right? You know that you're doing a certain treatment for a certain reason. So you're trying to understand, is that present in the data, yes or no? Or even to what Adriana was saying, is there a consequence that we weren't aware of, right? This is how you're able to see that quickly in the system and then understand how you can scale what works, right? Ideally, you're able to say, okay, this worked really well. And then how do you identify where to do that in your network elsewhere? So we're going to spend some time in one of the region's highest crash corridors. And I'm going to start presenting my screen now to do the live demo. And give me one moment here. Okay, great. Looks like you all can see my screen now, which is fantastic. So we are in our Analyze Areas section of the tool. And so we can see the entirety of the Metro Plan network here. So we're going to load a selection that I prepped this before the call, but we're going to look at Orange Blossom Trail. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this or have heard about this. I know some of you have probably even worked on this project, but it's about a mile-long corridor from 34th Street all the way down to Holden Avenue in Orlando. And the inception of this project was to increase pedestrian safety, right? So I think what we looked at was the project between Orlando and FDOT was really understanding how do we bring crosswalk safety, visibility, and speed reduction to this corridor to build in that VRU safety. So Laura and I worked together to identify a period of time that worked well for this. So we're going to choose a date range here. And so the intermediary date or intermediate date is the day that the project was complete. So we are going to say October 15th of 2023. We're going to drop back this from date to January 1st, 2019 to give us a full year of pre-COVID data. And then we're going to come into the end of 2025 with as much information as we have. So from there, we're able to look at the from date to October 15th, and then from October 15th all the way through December 31st. So, and then all you have to do is calculate this before and after, and it's going to spit out these KPIs up front. So prior to the completion of the project, there were 713 crashes, and afterwards there was 292. So we see some really great numbers here, and we'll break it down by percentage as well, where we saw a reduction in PDO crashes, a reduction in fatal crashes, and then as well as injury crashes as well. But we know we wanted to come in here and understand, did the treatments for VRU safety work, yes or no? So there's a lot of information here you can look at side by side, but we're going to come down to this collision type down here. And we can see that the 5th highest here prior to the completion of the project was there was 34 straight hit VRUs. And now we were able to see that we were able to drop that down to 7, which is really, really good to see. Another piece here is the right turn and left turn. These were 2 of the top ones as well. And we can see a massive reduction of both of these came down to 1 here. So one of the things that was done on this stretch of corridor was raised crosswalks, flashing beacons, et cetera. So we can see that those had a lot of success with reducing the friction that was happening between pedestrians crossing and cars turning. So definitely recommend you all spend some time playing around with this. But now that we understand, okay, these treatments were effective, they were successful, where else in the network can those actually be applicable? We're now going to move into what we call our reverse countermeasures tool. So as I had talked about a little bit earlier, this is a predictive tool within the system that is looking into the background, looking at crash patterns, looking at collision types, looking at time of day, everything and anything to understand within a certain jurisdiction filter, where can a countermeasure be productive in your system? It's looking at it just strictly from also the patterns in the background, but also from a dollars perspective as well. And I see some chats coming in. If these are questions for me, I'm so sorry. I cannot see them at this moment. Okay, thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're gonna talk through, as we had seen, we just saw a lot of success with the reduction, a lot of success across the board, but specifically with the left turn and right turns. So we're gonna look at the install a pedestrian hybrid beacon, and then we're gonna just say, in this example, okay, we're Orlando, where else would this be helpful within our network? So you can come in here, select jurisdiction, city, and then scroll down to Orlando, hit apply. And then automatically what the system's gonna do is it's gonna give you a network of where that's helpful and beneficial within your network. Dark green means that it has a high benefit to cost ratio. Red means you probably don't want to do that there. So you can see here that there's probably some familiar locations that come to mind right here. You can click in, do some analysis. You can show all info for a segment. You can click into this and it'll take you directly to the segment information there. You can do further information and digging in as needed. And then what's great about this too is that not only are you able to do that within, say Orlando did that, they're looking to do that further in their network, but something that's really great about this and having all of the data within MetroPlan Orlando is that you can learn from your neighbors, so to speak. So something else you can do here is say that you're Seminole County and you want to understand where can we benefit from seeing the install pedestrian beacon. You hit apply, select yours, and it automatically pulls in and ropes off your jurisdiction and does the analysis within that. There's many, many other areas of the tool that allow you to filter down just to your location. This is one, obviously, that's applicable for this demonstration here. Quick note on this gap. This is just because this is a very rural area and there's not a lot of VRU hits that are happening that would make the system offer up that as a place for that countermeasure. But this is really how I wanted to show this to you all, where you can evaluate, validate, and then scale. So want to go back to the deck now. And also if people do have questions, feel free to drop them in as well. So very, very kind of beginning of the iceberg, so to speak, but hopefully that's helpful and gets you guys thinking through how you can apply that directly with what you're working on now. So a couple of things to cover prior to me wrapping up here is more ways that you can actually put Crash to work. So we have this opportunity where you can actually ID the high entry pedestrian and bike corridors. So we have a VRU dashboard that immediately breaks out all pedestrian and bike related crashes and breaks it down by type, location, et cetera. It's a really good way to understand kind of what's happening overall in the network. Our custom queries is also a really good tool where you can filter down specifically on ped bike along with other filters as well. And then supporting enforcement prioritization. This is something we've seen a lot of folks do across the board with their sheriff's departments or local PD, but it's understanding how do you create efficiency within limited resources, right? Where should you actually be deploying resources in your network at certain times of the day? So we have a really good heat map within our crash tool by day. It's a temporal analysis where you can see where crashes are happening by time of day, live in a view. We also have the query tool and then HSIP rankings that are dynamic based on data coming in. So you can see at any point, top 10 intersections and top 10 segments within your jurisdiction that are causing problems. Also helpful for conducting road safety audits. So Laura, hopefully this can take some of the burden off of walking around in this sweltering heat. But this is a really good way to kind of understand where to start, right? Or what's happening just based on our satellite views within analyzed areas, our crash diagrams, and then again, that hotspot identification. And then finally, another piece that a lot of folks use us for is that public transparency. So it's using this to prepare for either public inquiries that are coming in, Yeah, Emily, I'm assuming you're talking through. Yes, we'll go over that in a moment as well. But this is for anybody who is underneath the Metro Plan Orlando umbrella. So we'll talk about how to get access to this shortly. Yeah, that's great. And then yeah, so finally for public transparency, we have the report summaries, collision diagrams, and fact sheets. A lot of times this is really great because you can see the entire history of an intersection with one click. Oh no, oh, it's doing it again. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. I don't know what phantom clicker is happening, but anyway, all this being said, this was really meant to be, I could talk about this for hours. Our trainings usually take about 8+ hours at a time. So really what this was intended to do is to give you a bite-sized piece of what Crash is able to do, give you some opportunity to see it in action. And then, of course, what's great is that Laura and I are working together to actually set up bi-weekly webinars where we'll pick a topic of conversation, and I'll be leading that for about an hour, talking through how to work out a use case in the system. So our first one will be on July 31st, and we'll be really focusing on analyzing crash patterns within a radius and how to actually use that information with planning dollars, right? So that's something we'll talk through. Want to make that very interactive. It's going to be something that I think people will get a lot of use out of. So, and finally, to Emily's point, yes, if you don't have access, please reach out. So if you just shoot me an email or Laura with the subject line jurisdiction, say access to Crash, please just do that. And that's something that we can get you into the system. I'm also happy to do one-on-one sessions for 30 minutes just to give you a quick orientation of where to use the system, how to use it, etc. So great. Hopefully this was productive for everybody and useful, and happy to answer any questions as they come up. But yeah, thank you for the time and having me on the call.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa. That was fantastic. And I hope that you all will reach out to Teresa or myself if you either need access or have any questions about how you can use the Crash platform, and that those that have time to join us on the 31st do so. We will have some additional sort of office hours available, so we can stay tuned for when those additional ones will be coming up. But a reminder, I think I gave this talk at TAC meeting, our last TAC meeting, but we have sort of invested in this Crash platform, like some of our other sort of data vendor opportunities, Streetlight or SDK, as a resource for all of you, so that you take advantage of it and ask any questions that you may have about how to access it or use it. So from there, I think we can move forward. Thanks to all of you who have hung in there. We are getting to the end of our slide deck, I promise. I do want to leave a little space, though, to welcome Virginia, who's going to join us. As you may have noted, based on the fact that I think I've done 2 presentations that talk about micromobility safety as a part of my update this time, that this is really high on our list of sort of priority actions that we're working on right now. Have been challenged, I would say, by our board to make sure that we are engaging regionally on the topic. So let me see if she's on with us right now. Virginia is going to share a little bit about an upcoming regional working group on micromobility. That said, if she does not pop up soon, I will just share.
Yeah, I'm
Oh, you're here. There you are. Thanks,
I'm here,
Virginia.
Laura.
I was like looking for your face. I'll be quiet now. Thanks, Virginia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And wow, this has been some really informative information. And thanks for all the work that you all do. I just wanted to pop on just for a few minutes to share an update about the task force on the Central Florida Micromobility Safety Initiative, which was formed by the Metro Plan Orlando Board at its meeting last week. The initiative is a regional effort that is focused on addressing safety issues associated with e-bikes and e-scooters and other micromobility devices. The initiative is being led by Metro Plan Orlando's board officers, our chair, Nicole Wilson from Orange County, our vice chair, Viviana Janer, who is commissioner down in Osceola County, and Commissioner Bob Delari, Seminole County, and our secretary treasurer. The goal is to bring together local governments, school districts, colleges and universities, law enforcement, our transportation partners, many of who you are, health and safety organizations, and other stakeholders to explore opportunities for greater regional coordination and the development of a regional policy framework. The board leadership team, as Laura mentioned, has tasked the Metro Plan Orlando staff with convening an initial regional roundtable that will be later this summer. It's kind of shaping up around the late August timeframe, but we're currently coordinating schedules, and we'll share additional information as we finalize a date and location. Because many of the issues that are being explored through this initiative align closely with the work that the Vision Zero Task Force is doing, we wanted to make sure that this group is, first of all, among the first to hear about the initiative if you haven't already, but also the expertise that is represented here on the task force is going to be an important resource as the initiative develops. The chair specifically stated that the Vision Zero Task Force will be a resource to the Central Florida Micromobility Initiative. Many of the topics likely to be discussed include education, enforcement, infrastructure, data, and policy. And these are areas where this group has already made some significant strides in experience, and you have the insight. In fact, many of your organizations are already undertaking efforts that may help identify best practices and opportunities for greater regional consistency, which was one of the things that Mayor Dyer spoke to in his comments at the board meeting. So my objective today was simply to make you aware of the initiative and to encourage you to start giving some thought about what you see in your respective communities, through your organizations, what safety concerns are emerging, what strategies or programs are showing promise, and then, of course, where the gaps and opportunities may be. And as we move forward into the stakeholder engagement phase, those observations and experiences will definitely help inform the regional discussion and the development of the policy framework. So we just wanted to just put this on your radar, let you know that we will be coming back to keep you informed and to invite and engage you in the process. Don't have a whole lot more to share with you right now, but just know that we will circle back and invite your expertise. And so, Laura, that's all I have. And thanks for having me this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Virginia. That was fantastic. And for all of you that are still on the call, more to come on our regional coordination. I can see if we look forward to working with you guys. I think we can move on next to our public comment period as we're heading towards wrapping up. If there are any of you that are interested in making a public comment, if you could raise your hand and we will recognize you in a couple of minutes. All right. No, we won't.
Oh, hey Laura, I apologize. I didn't hear you. Hello, everyone. Wonderful presentations as always. Thank you to the MetroPlan team for all your research on these really incredible topics. I definitely need to debrief, and I know you'll be sending the slides, so I need to review some of those again with a fine-tooth comb. Why I wanted to hop on was just to let everybody know that today marks the first day of our Operation Best Foot Forward. So our pedestrian safety enforcement is happening now through August 4th. So it'll be a month-long, roughly, enforcement operation across 11 counties. So we do have almost every single sheriff's office committed. We have a few that we're waiting on some dates. We will have over 50 details with this enforcement operation, which is the largest to date. I feel like a broken record saying that, but so really great engagement from the partners. We've had a lot of new cities participate in some of the counties that are going through some of their Vision Zero efforts. They're a little bit behind the Central Florida group, but you've all inspired them. So thank you for all the work that you are doing. And watch out for pedestrians on the roadway. We'll be watching out for you, making sure that you're driving safe. So thank you, Laura, and thank you, everyone. Good seeing you.
All right, thanks so much, Emily. And I'm not seeing any other hands that are up, so I think we can move forward and head into the meeting wrap-up slides, starting with member comments. If any of the members that are still on the call have anything else that they want to share with the group, now is your time while you're thinking about anything you might want to say. There's a couple of things that I just wanted to note that I didn't sort of cover before. First, just had few thank yous. I think I already thanked our roundtable participants from the white paper, but wanted to thank you all again. You were instrumental in being able to complete that white paper. Also wanted to ask all of you who have been participants on one of the RSAs so far, the opportunity for some others that haven't been on an RSA. In particular, Lorraine, thanks to you and your team. I don't know, for those who may have noticed that initial list for the group one corridor, I think 5 of the 7 are on state roadways. They were just, high priority corridors of the ones that were requested. And so thank you for providing team members to assist us with that and for other reviews that you're doing on our draft reports that we have sort of rolling out now. And then I wanted to actually thank Fair and Peers. That's actually where I'm sitting in their offices today, because right now all of us at MetroPlan Orlando are working remotely while our office space is having some light renovations done on it. So if you go to our offices looking for us and don't find us, we are still around, and we should be back in office, I think, sometime in the early September timeframe, but more to come on when our actual open date will be. But for now, we're still available and reachable virtually. I think with that, let's see if there are any hands raised for member comments. Nope, I think that's it. So I will move along and just note that we have another Vision Zero Safety Speakers webinar coming up in the fall. We don't have a date for that yet, but we should get that probably wrapped up in the next few weeks, and we'll send out a notice once we do have that date finalized. Our next webinar will be on automated enforcement, so feature cameras, school zone cameras, that sort of thing, the breadth of those. So we encourage you to tune into that if you're able to. And for those who are interested in some of the other webinars in our Vision 050 speaker series, you can get to all of those webinars using the short link that's shown on the slide, or using the QR shown on the slide. So encourage you to check those out. And then looking towards our next task force meeting, our Q3 meeting, that one's going to be an in-person meeting. So if you've already notated it on your calendar, if you could note that will be in person, that would be great. We're going to have a really great agenda, I think, for that meeting. We'll have Kevin Elliott, who has actually done training on selling the safe system approach for LTAP. We're going to be bringing him to our region to sort of focus on us for a day. So for those of you who wish you were better able to talk about why the safe system approach is so important to others in your organization, whether it's different departments or elected officials or citizens, we'll be able to have, I think, some great conversations about that, how we can best communicate why the safe system approach is important, and what we can do to work together to improve safety in the region. In addition to Kevin's presentation, we'll be circling back on reporting out on the safety performance measures tasks that we have underway that we were working to report on. And then that policy and design guidance task that we teased at the last task force meeting. We'll have some things for you to review, and we'll be asking for some sort of best practices from you at our next meeting as well. So more to come on that, but that will be Tuesday, September 22nd. And again, that'll be in person and be back in our offices by then. I think with that will be our last slide. Yes. So thanks to all of you that were able to hang in. Thank you so much. We're at the end of our time today. So have a great day.